afternoon. It's a good day to you all. If you don't know me, my name is Dan Simone. I am the Gallery and Exhibitions Coordinator at the Artist Archives of the Western Reserve. We are your hosts today. Thank you all for coming out. The Artist Archives of the Western Reserve, if you don't know, is a unique archival facility and regional museum that preserves representative bodies of work created by Ohio visual artists, and through ongoing research, exhibition, and educational programs, actively documents and promotes this cultural heritage for the benefit of the public. This panel specifically was inspired by Common Currents, a joint exhibition of work by visual artists from Northeast Ohio and Western New York, currently on display in our galleries. That was itself inspired by conversations between Cleveland artist and Artist Archives board member John Sargent. John, where are you? There you are. And Buffalo artist Gary Wolfe, who began to sketch out the beginnings of this collaborative exhibition in 2020. These conversations led to a partnership between Artist Archives and the Birchfield Penny Art Center in Buffalo, New York. And after a lot of cooperation and even more conversation, we opened the collaborative exhibition on April 10th. Excuse me. I've been losing my voice all week, bear with me. In addition to the logistical considerations of putting on a co-op exhibition, John and Jean also discussed the similarities of the two cities, both once thriving industrial cities engaged in a 21st century reboot, with the visual arts poised to play a key role in this renewal. It is the spirit of those discussions that inspired us to arrange this panel. As a note, the Common Currents exhibition runs through June 21st, and then we'll move to the Birchfield Penny, where it will be on display through November. My last thing is the Artist Archives of the Western Reserve would like to thank our funders, the Ohio Arts Council, Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, the people of Cuyahoga County, the George Gund Foundation, the Bernice and David E. Davis Foundation, the Zufall Foundation, and the galleries at Cleveland State University for their continuing support. Now I'll bring up Gina Washington, our program coordinator.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming on this beautiful spring afternoon. There's a lot happening in Cleveland, and we're going to partake in all that when we leave. But it would be disingenuous for me to do the land acknowledgement, so I invited my friend Lolita Wilson. She's going to give the land acknowledgement, and after that, I'll do the introductions to our guests. Lolita is a multi-talented artist. She's a part of the Visit Arts Collective. I am of that too. And the Visit Arts Collective likes to create experiential shows that tap into your holistic mind, essentially. We like to create with sound, with words, with the visuals. We like to bring a full body experience. And some people may have seen those things happening at Rooms to Let. So Lolita Wilson is a part of that. So I'd like to invite her to do the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Gina. My name is Lolita Wilson, and I'm a native Clevelander, and I want to do the land acknowledgements. We want to acknowledge that the land that we broadcast from and the place that we call Cuyahoga County is the land that was claimed by the United States government through force, displacement, and treaties negotiated in bad faith. We acknowledge those of the Shawnee, Miami, Erie, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and I can't even pronounce it, Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Those lands we stand on, and the thousands of Native Americans representing over 100 tribes who currently live in Northeast Ohio, and I'm one of them. We came from Oklahoma, from the Sioux Nation, the Lakota Sioux Nation. My family migrated to East Liverpool, Ohio, and then came to Cleveland. And we actually got reclassified. We couldn't say that we were natives. We had to classify ourselves as Negro and colored because of our skin color. and there was a treaty still in effect called the Indian Removal Act. So we couldn't wear our regalia, we couldn't practice any ceremonies, we couldn't talk in our tongue, we couldn't have our names. So my name is from the people who owned us, the people who took us in, and they were English and Irish settlers. And so now my name is Lolita Wilson, which is probably English and German. But my family who came here, and my great-grandmother had 14 children, and her daughter, her baby girl, was my grandmother, and she died in 2013. Her sister, last of 14 children, she passed away probably like 5 years ago. She was 100 years old. All of us had different names, changed over time, but we actually acknowledge ourselves as people of color and Black. But inside, when we come to the family reunion, we all know who we are. So we celebrated when we came together. And it's a very mixed family. And we welcome all our relatives. We have blue eyes, blonde people in our family. We have from the darkest dark to the richest, from the lightest light to the richest dark. And that's my family. But we're still here, and I do acknowledge them. And I want to thank this committee for allowing me to share that little bit with you guys. And I'll continue to make the art that will represent my people and my city, Cleveland and Cuyahoga County. Thank you. And I'll turn this back over to Gina.
Well, I also like you guys to know that at Artists Archives, we're doing what's called the Legacy Workshops that I created for all of us visual artists, all of us artists from any genre and their families to learn how to preserve your legacy beyond you. So that'll be coming down the pike. It's happening all year round. We've had at least 3 or 4 workshops right now on how to document, how to document and catalog your work, how to preserve your work. And last week we had one, well, actually on the 10th, we had one on how to legally take care of your stuff, trust and wills and things to that effect. But as for today, each of these panelists have a common stake in our local Cleveland arts economy, yet each brings a unique and important perspective. Jeremy Johnson is an outspoken champion for cities, public-private initiatives, and the role of the creative sector in improving America's communities. And we need a lot of improvement right now, right? He became president and CEO of Assembly for the Arts, a regional arts council, in June 2021, and they're actually in this building. Hillary Gent is not only an artist, but also the owner of Hedge Gallery, a successful gallery located in the Sydney Street Studios complex, which you should have been to last Friday, right?
Last night.
It's since 2009.
Or Wednesday.
Yeah, there you go. As a painter, Hillary works with oil and latex mediums inspired by the urban and natural landscapes. Jordan Wong, on the opposite end, is a successful professional artist who has made a career in Cleveland. Jordan has produced large-scale installations and public artwork for the city of Cleveland, as well as exhibited at the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh, Massillon Museum, and Akron Art Museum. From 2020 to 2022, Jordan served as the president of the Cleveland chapter of AIGA, the Professional Association for Design, and he is also a TAF recipient, so we'll be looking out for his transformative art that's going to be coming down the pike August, September. Our moderator for this conversation is Michael Gill, Executive Director, Editor, Publisher at Can Journal, which I am also a member on the board. His writing for publications, including the National Endowment for the Arts, for the Humanities, magazine Humanities, Cleveland Magazine, the Cleveland Free Times, and Cleveland Scene, has won multiple awards for the Press Club of Cleveland. And you recently got another acknowledgement from Arts Summit, right? Yeah. So Michael's going to be moderating. You guys, I think you may want to hold your questions for the end.
Yeah, that's all.
And enjoy the arts economy that's happening in Cleveland.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming out on a Saturday. I'm Michael Gill. I probably know most of you anyway. This conversation is about art in a changing economy, and I think it's important to begin by noting the many ways, just so that we can touch on them, that the art economy is changing. Before I dive deep into that, though, I want to tell you, there's copies of 2 Can journals, multiple copies of 2 different editions of Can in the back. The one just came out last night, which is where you really should have been last night. So we were at Ed Parker's museum, and the summer issue is out, and it's back there, and you haven't seen it yet, I guarantee. So grab a copy. And then, of course, getting back to this conversation, it's pegged and inspired by Common Currents, which is the exhibit that John and his friend and artist Gary Wolf from Buffalo created, which is now on view at Artists' Archives. There's an essay about that, and specifically addressing the collaborative exchange between the 2 cities in the most recent issue of Can. And if you haven't seen that, please grab a copy of that as well. But let's get to the ways that the economy is changing. First, I think you just have to acknowledge that we're seeing another attempt to dismantle federal support for the arts and humanities, which has already impacted organizations that have direct grants directly from the NEA, including many of them in Northeast Ohio, and also that could have a ripple effect in places like Ohio, because the Ohio Arts Council's budget is a line item in the state budget, and it's set by Ohio legislators. And they tend to go red. They seem to like the current president and his ideas. And it's entirely possible that that thinking could ripple down and impact the state's own investment in the arts and culture, which historically has been bipartisan and strong. However, this administration seems a little different. For the betterment of all humankind, let's not talk anymore about that. It's also worth noting that technology, for better or for worse, is playing a big role in the arts economy now. And the subject du jour really is artificial intelligence, which I'm not going to say it could, it will both devalue the application of some artistic skills. We'll certainly see that play out in commercial art, in design for commercial projects. We'll certainly see it play out in film as expensive things are replaced by artificial intelligence. We'll also see it open up new fields of creativity as artists learn how to use it and create new kinds of experience. It's a huge subject. Let's not talk about that either. But it does lead toward some things that are more directly relevant to artists in town and to the present arts and the economy. Not that these are primary focuses of this conversation, but I just want to acknowledge them and certainly invite the artists on the panel to talk about how they may be playing out in their own experience. One thing is that extremely high quality prints are now available. Accessible to anybody. You know, you can go to multiple different providers and get what we call giclée prints. And not too long ago, your only option for making multiples of your work was either to begin with a fine art print reproduction like an intaglio or a screen reproduction and make it as a multiple from the get, or to paint a copy, as has certainly been done through history, or something like photocopying. These were options for real reproductions of fine art. But now, with Epson printers and other types of machines, you can make limited editions of beautifully created, textured copies of work, as many artists do. You've certainly seen Bob Peck do this. There's a watercolorist, Brian Asquith, who's doing this as a regular feature in their galleries. Make an edition of 100, sign them, and sell those for a 10th of the price or a 20th of the price of what those same people would sell an original for. And that becomes a whole different stream. And certainly some of the people on our panel have seen that. Complete shift of gears. COVID and some other factors have played a big role in the current arts economy. COVID in the sense that it inspired a couple of years of public art investment. You couldn't go to museums for a little bit, and you could only go to galleries under really controlled circumstances. And so, the Land Studio created the City is Our Museum project, which is an app you can have on your phone, which is a guide to public art all over the city. Community Development Corps and cities invested in a big way in public art, including something that had been going on a little longer. They recognized the power of art to help a neighborhood, to beautify, to engage people, and began to do things like buy murals in bulk quantities with municipal budgets, which means new jobs at a whole different pay scale in many cases, not that they were always paid fairly, but in many cases, artists had been paid well to go and do a mural. And so I know several people who really kind of shifted their economic interest to getting those contracts. And they'd still paint and they'd still do exhibits, but if you can get paid $5,000 or $10,000 for this one commission and know when it begins and ends versus the speculative effort to sell in a gallery, that has its appeal. And I know that, Jordan certainly has plenty of experience doing large-scale public art around Cleveland and elsewhere. And so maybe he'll be able to talk about that. But the larger, long-term thing that brings us together, I think, to talk about arts and the changing economy is a shrinking population, fewer corporate headquarters, fewer jobs, stratification of incomes, and therefore customer bases. And it's certainly not just Cleveland. It's around the Great Lakes. Buffalo, Detroit, Pittsburgh, and other cities have all dealt with the decline of industry, the departure of corporate headquarters, the reduction of their investment in orchestras, museums, individual artist collections, all those things. And that is one of the things that puts those very places in the same sort of boat. If you talk to artists in those other places, I think you hear many of the same concerns, that people don't buy art too much here. There's a $400 ceiling on what you're going to sell very much of. Those same questions are playing out in those other places. So that brings us to common currents. I brought that one issue removed of Cannes, the last one, because it has this essay which really emphasizes that I think that this is a really great model. And I think that Artists Archives should really be credited for, and John and Gary Wolf, for creating this idea of working with somebody in another city to show artists in both cities to a new curator from elsewhere and to a new audience from elsewhere, and travel the show to the other place. Since Cannes started, I have heard from artists and dealers and curators that we need to figure out how to get beyond Cleveland. We need to make connections to other markets. We don't have enough money or people here by ourselves. How do we show our work elsewhere? How do we grow the pie, as Jeremy also often says, talking about funding models? And so these are the things that I really want the conversation to focus on. Relationships, regional partnerships, strategies that each of our panelists have tried, maybe that didn't work, ongoing relations that they have. But those are things that I want to hear from folks on. So, three very different people, different relationships to the art sector. You know, Jordan acting a lot as an individual artist, Hillary doing that also, but working as a dealer and an active dealer, like who works at selling the stuff. She's not just opening her gallery on Third Friday. She's one of those unusual galleries at 78th Street Studios that is open most days. You can walk in, and she works a mailing list, you know, and she really works at selling. And so she's got experience in trying to do the kind of thing that we're talking about. And of course, Jeremy works in another realm of the sector, trying to grow the pie of funding. And that involves relationships, partnerships, inspiration from other cities as well. Jeremy is from the Cleveland area, but he came most recently from Philadelphia, where he worked in a similar realm, establishing.
New Jersey.
I'm sorry, New Jersey. Over there.
Close.
So before we go further, I'd like to just hear each of you talk a little bit about your experience with other cities. And let's start with Jordan, who I know has exhibited in Pittsburgh. He knows some of the artists actually in this show who are from Buffalo, the Common Currents exhibit. And he has definitely proactively reached out to other cities to find, you know, clients. So can you talk a little bit about your work and how that's gone?
Yeah. Can everyone hear me? I know it's not
There are mics there.
I don't know if we need it.
You might not.
This thing. Is this one?
Yeah, you're good.
Hello? Okay. I feel like it's not even catching up. So for those that don't know, I'm actually originally from Pittsburgh. I lived there 20 years before coming to Cleveland in 2015. And I'll say it really started like talking about like building up relationships, especially in other cities, right? So back then I was from Pittsburgh, I was new to Cleveland. And within that first week, I went to everything that I could. At that time, I was still focusing on graphic design for my profession. So what I did was I went to, you know, an AIGA that week that I moved into town. I also went to all the different art institutions and museums. Within the first month that still within the first weeks that I moved to Cleveland, I went to MoCA, and at that time, I forget her last name, but her name's Jacqueline. She does marketing for CMA now.
Oh, Jackie Bond.
Bond, yes.
Yeah, sure.
So I met Jackie Bond when she was a gallery attendant at MoCA back like 10 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, now we're looking at like time skip 10 years later. You know, I received an email invite from her to attend the media influencers preview of the Takashi Murakami exhibition. So it's, you know, it's really making the initiative and just saying hi to people whenever you're in a new place and space. And whenever I go to different cities, I tried to carve out some time of seeing, what are the art institutions there, who are the executive directors, if they're part of nonprofits, who are, gallery owners, curators. Do I have anyone in my network that might know someone, in these different cities? Or now starting to expand in countries. Shout out to Karen Beckwith, who's actually connected me to some people in Taiwan. So I think it's really rooted, we talk about relationship building, and I think really that's rooted in just initiative, and just, taking the time to prioritize that, and to send out that email, to say hello, to stop by, to ask if someone can make an introduction for you. I always tell other artists that this profession is rooted and built upon the people that you get to work with, and the relationship building is so key.
Yeah. Did you find it hard to meet people when you came to Cleveland as an adult?
No.
You just walked up to them and said hello?
I mean, it's not like I was just like walking around the street and just saying hi to random people, But I will say that that at that time and still to this day, there's just a lot going on. So there's people at different events that are interested in the same things that you're into. And when I first moved here, I was talking to another Cleveland transplant about this, Deanna Dion. She's also an artist, and she came from Michigan, and both of us were noticing how Cleveland is a city where people really are interested in your ideas, and they really want to help you, build things, create things, and succeed. Which I don't know if that's the case for really, really large cities, or maybe even some other cities. But Cleveland is really special in that regard. So
I wonder if that's actually evolving. I grew up around Cleveland, but I left for 10 years or something. But when I came back in the early 90s, I found it difficult to meet people, and this was my hometown. It felt to me like they all had their friends. And I had come from Washington, D.C., where it feels like everybody wants to talk to you. They're all 25. They're all at the bar for a drink. They all work for their congressman or what have you. And it was really easy to meet people there. But back in Cleveland, I didn't know how.
I think my experience was, I had the advantage of being from another city. Ironically enough, Pittsburgh, because, it depends on who I met, if I could tell if they were into sports or not. I don't know if I was from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
But, those that get over the sports rivalry, when I would tell them oh yeah, I'm actually, I just moved here from another city, they'd be like, well, where are you from? Their interest peaked a little bit.
Yeah.
But I noticed that was also the case when I lived in Pittsburgh, what you experienced.
Yeah.
So I don't think I would be where I'm at in my career if I had stayed in Pittsburgh.
Interesting.
Honestly. And it's kind of like a profits not welcome in their hometown kind of thing.
Yeah.
I felt that I was really able to use the fact that I was kind of new kid on the block, and I had kind of a fresh start.
Yeah. Hillary, can you talk a little bit about relationships also, which I know is something that you work to keep in touch with people, and I know you've had customers come from other places. Talk a little bit about how you've built relationships and maybe some examples and how they keep going.
Sure. I would say a lot of the relationship building just kind of happened naturally for me because I am a people person, and I'm an introvert as an artist, but an extrovert in what I do, which is promoting artists. And I'm passionate about that because I graduated from a local art school, Kent State University, with a fine art degree, painting. And I knew how difficult it was out of art school to meet gallerists and people in museums. It was so scary. And my personal experience was just utter terror when I walk into those places. So I always had this seed in the back of my mind that obviously grew into what is now Hedge Gallery, but I knew that I wanted to help people like myself with that struggle. So the gallery was initially created with a focus on not so established artists, people that were emerging, people that were just graduating from art schools. And at that time, I started the gallery in 2009. I kept a really close relationship with Penn State University and the art directors there and the people that ran galleries there, and my professors there. So that's just a little history on, why I've continued to just put all my energy into relationship building, because I know that it works, and it takes a lot of energy. In terms of building relationships in other states, I would say that I haven't hit that mark quite yet. I've attempted to collaborate with other galleries. There was a gallery I visited last summer in New York, and we had met through another gallerist here in Cleveland. And the goal was to take some of the artists that we represent at Hedge to that gallery in New York, which focuses on more group exhibitions. They represent artists, but they also bring in artists from all over the country. And it just didn't work out. And I don't know why, but I don't think I had the energy, with being a mother and trying to focus on personal life things and balancing a roster of 15 artists and trying to make my own artwork to make it happen. So that was my first real attempt with another gallery to do something like John has obviously succeeded in through the Artist Archives. Am I disappointed? Maybe a little bit.
Sure.
But I think that there will be other opportunities. Most of our out-of-state clients have happened when we developed our website. We turned it into an e-commerce website in 2020 during COVID. And we did that because obviously we couldn't open our doors and we had some free time. And changing a website from just a basic static, landing page and, basic layout platform to an e-commerce site takes a lot of time. But I had a great designer on my team and we dedicated all the free time that we had to doing that. And it's been very successful. The people that buy from out of state are Googling Cleveland Art or Cleveland Art Museum or Art Galleries Cleveland, and they land on our page. A lot of it is, I hate to say this, but it's by coincidence. Or a blessing, or whatever you call it. But we do work really hard to keep our page at the top of Google searches. We look at our analytics weekly to see what people are clicking on, to see which artists they're searching, and to see what type of art they're looking at. And we can do that in the background of our website. I'm not a technology person at all. I have someone assist me full-time in social media and in website development and design. But honestly, that's probably, I can say, where we've met the most out-of-state.
I think you did tell me at one point that somebody on vacation or visiting Cleveland from North Carolina had come into the gallery,
Yeah.
and that they kept, because of a canned journal, that's why I know this. But that you kept in touch with them, and they continued to be a customer,
Yeah, I
right?
haven't heard from them since COVID,
Okay.
unfortunately, but, so I don't know what's going on. But yeah, they picked up a canned journal in a local hotel, and they read about an encaustic artist that I was showing, and they made their way over to the gallery on Saturday afternoon, very unassuming, didn't have a fancy handbag or shoes, and bought three pieces of this encaustic artist's work, and then continued to buy, large item artwork, but a decent amount. So it was like 2017 to 2020 that we kept that relationship. But the reason they walked in the gallery was because of the article in
That's
Journal,
super fun to hear.
which was at their hotel. So it is about relationships. It is about marketing. It is about connecting with people. And I think that third point is the most important. It really is about storytelling for the artists, communicating their stories and their dialogues, and creating personal relationships with
Yeah.
buyers.
I bet you really didn't expect to be talking about relationships in a conversation about the Cleveland art economy. But I just become, more and more firm in my belief that that it is about relationships. I certainly see it in keeping Can Journal going, but I also see it in these conversations. As Jordan said, it's who you work with, and that can lead you to other things because you know somebody, they know somebody, and you make connections that way. And same for the kinds of things that Hillary has been talking about.
Can I say one?
Yeah, please.
I think writing is especially important as well. And Michael, I have to give you so many props for keeping Can Journal going. It's so important. It's so important. We don't have arts writers. We barely did. And it's unfortunate because people want to, Google search press that they can find on artists. And when they can't find any, sometimes that steers them in a different direction. So I think that's something that we are really missing. It's something that Can Journal provides for us, thankfully. But I think we're really missing that. Peter Shakarian just wrote an article about the last exhibition I had, and it was completely unexpected. He got my press release through the artist. So artists are good promoters and marketing people as well. You can take that under your, a million things to do on your to-do list. You can add that to it. But it does make a difference when these writers not only receive a press release from the gallery, but also, a nudge from the artist. And again, it's additional work. It requires a lot of energy and follow-up and nudging and all of that. But writing in Cleveland is about the arts in general, not just the fine arts, is so important, and we don't have enough of it.
I totally love taking Can to other cities and giving it to people in other places because it's a physical object that you can give them, but it represents all this stuff in Cleveland, and it's like a catalog. And for one thing, it looks nice, thanks to Joanne Dickey, who's our designer. But for another, people have no idea that there's this much activity going on in Cleveland. And it's the relationship, it's the specific connection to somebody elsewhere that raises that awareness. However you do it, if you do it on the phone, if you do it with Constant Contact or MailChimp, or however you keep in touch with people in person, especially to make personal connections. Really, relationships led to Common Currents, for example, which has created this traveling exhibit. John Sargent was in Buffalo for a little while and met Gary Wolf, an artist there, and they just continued to talk about doing something between the two cities until it resulted in this exhibit. And I think a challenge and making a transition to Jeremy's realm, a challenge for exhibits like that is somebody has to pay for it. And that'll be a challenge for anybody that takes that up, whether it's Artists Archives, you have to, it's a nonprofit organization. Probably you have to get a grant or find a sponsor or something, because if you're going to go to the other city, if you're going to send a curator to the other city, if you're going to put that person up for a couple of days while they do studio visits, if you're going to pay them a stipend for the work, if you're going to travel the work from one place to another, all that costs money, and somebody's got to pay for it. And so that's a challenge for nonprofit venues. But for for-profit galleries, it's probably even harder, because they don't have the 501c3 that enables them to reach out to this foundation or that one to support this project. They have to figure out, they have to do it on sales or just out of their pocket, or that's really a hard thing to do. But the money brings me to Jeremy, and the specific reason that Jeremy is great on this subject is because of relationships. Jeremy is no longer so new back in town, but when he came back in town, and still, he's everywhere. like Jeremy, like more than just about anybody on the scene, like I go out to shows 2 or 3 nights a week, and I see Jeremy, it seems like 2 or 3 nights a week. Like he is everywhere, but he's also at concerts. You know, I go to visual art shows, but Jeremy is at all the disciplines, maintaining relationships in Cleveland. But also, growing the pie and reaching into other realms and learning from people. So if you can talk a little bit about how relationships have played a role and talk about some of the work that you're trying to do through that to grow the pie, that would be really helpful.
Thank you, Michael. First off, thanks to the Archives for having this great panel, and I agree that the Can Journal is really one of the great things about being in the greater Cleveland area. It is truly something that makes us proud, connects us all, especially the visual arts world. Makes my job a lot easier to point people to Can Journal as a tangible piece. Let's keep this as a printed publication, please. Relationship building. It's kind of interesting that we're in this brand new building, the grand opening of which was last night, and this place is called the Midtown Collaboration Center. Assembly, our office is located here. We're co-located with Cleveland Arts Prize and with the Cleveland Arts Education Consortium. That is by design. All the spaces in this building are open to the community. We have Jumpstart upstairs, we have health, education facilities are here. Why do I mention that? You just mentioned it costs money to bring people together and sometimes to create the forums for relationships to happen. In many cities, that's a role that arts councils play. So Assembly for the Arts is an arts council. So literally, I have the privilege of raising dollars and raising visibility so we can convene and bring together artists, arts organizations, arts champions. It is so important. Let me tell you a story. So at one of our assemblies or artist meetups, which we have regularly, there was an artist from Zimbabwe. She's an immigrant artist. Some of you may know her, Sylvia Munazapo. So she came to one of the gatherings, was networking, and was just saying to her friend, where can I find a gallery? I got all this great art. Where can I find a gallery? Behind her was sitting a gallerist who owned a gallery in Old Brooklyn, Pinwheel Gallery. She overheard this. Hey, I got a gallery. What kind of art do you have? Look, they built this relationship. This is about a year and a half ago.
That's Sarah Raban at Pinwheel Gallery.
Yes,
Yeah.
Pinwheel Gallery. So she has a one-woman show. Just a few months later, this didn't happen over years. Within 3 months, Sylvia had a one-woman show at Pinwheel. Fast forward another year, she's now got a one-woman show at University Circle Inc. Right here, the new headquarters in University Circle that they've renovated. And it's more and more. And it all started with relationship building. It all started with some entity bringing people together in a room such as this, understanding the importance of connectivity, the importance of assembly, the importance. It's hard to quantify that, although we need to quantify. Does Cleveland have the type of relationship building that would make artists, and this is going to be the ironic part of the conversation, that would make artists want to stay here and connected to this? So I come to this conversation a little bit of a conundrum. Well, all of us have, at least on this panel, have been in Cleveland. We spent many years in other places and have come back. But part of my job at Assembly is to convince artists and to show them that they can continue to do their craft, they can build their business by staying in Cleveland. So I'm a little bit torn. However, there are some exceptions. Second story. About a year and a half ago, Cleveland brought on a new senior arts person for City Hall, for which the artist community had advocated for years. And she had connections across the country. Y'all may know Rhonda Brown. One of those connections was a gallerist in Miami Art Fair. Long story short, that gallerist came up to visit Cleveland, went to some studios, and said, these are some great artists. I'd love to bring them to Miami. So Rhonda worked with that gallery, the gallerist, selected artists, and the mayor was a big fan of that. Let's put Cleveland artists in Miami, because that's the world stage, Miami Art Week, and help to elevate their careers, help to elevate Cleveland as an art city. So that's one story of looking to other cities and back and forth, where how do we elevate? And Hillary talked, you talked about the importance of these national, international connections. So I do think it is important, but at the same time, I would say, stay here in Cleveland, don't leave. But sometimes you do have to leave to come back. So I just wanted to share those two stories.
For sure. Those are great stories. The Miami story in particular, I don't know if you're all familiar with that, but Rhonda knew the dealer who organizes Prism, which is a fair, an event during Miami Art Week. So there's a whole lot of art going on in Miami during that time, and Prism, as an annual event, is showing African-American artists in that context. And because of that relationship between Rhonda and the curator there, and with some financial support to make that possible, because you couldn't have done that if you were depending on 7 different artists to, get their work there. I mean,
There was definitely financial support. I should also add, I went down to see this great exhibit and to see the other big fairs, but on the flight down and back, there were other Clevelanders on those flights, collectors from Cleveland. They weren't just going to Prism, so we have to acknowledge the power of institutions like Cleveland Museum of Art, just this big environment where we have a city that values arts, MoCA. We have folks who don't just stay in Cleveland. They travel back and forth. I think they sort of float under the radar. Do they not? I see my friend here, who travel all over looking at art across the nation and the world. So Cleveland, is an international city for arts. I think it is sometimes maybe challenging to get to know who those collectors are. Artists, they would give their left hand and say, who are the collectors in our midst?
Right.
So I think that's another story that I don't have. I'm the only non-visual artist on this panel, but I would look to my colleagues to help with that.
Yeah, there was one of the things that CAN has done over the years. We ran a year-long series of essays by different people with different perspectives about the Cleveland Museum of Art's May show. This was provoked by an essay that Henry Adams wrote, urging the Cleveland Museum to bring that back or do something like it to represent artists of this region in that exalted museum context. And at the time, so we published that essay, and at the time Fred Bidwell was interim director of the Cleveland Museum and felt the need to respond. You may or may not know that Fred at one point was in the May show as a young photographer. And he appreciated it for that, but he emphatically said the museum won't be doing this again. And he argued that point. And then along came, you may know, Jim Corcoran, a dealer, longtime dealer in Cleveland who's had some remarkable successes in identifying work from estates and so on. But anyway, Jim had another perspective, which was the validation that an institution like that can play. And the reason I'm talking more about this is because Bill Busta batted cleanup and wrote an essay that called on the major institutions to play their role in supporting artists of this region, which the Cleveland Museum somewhat notoriously has not done very much. But also, what is Spaces going to do to elevate artists of this region? What is MoCA, going to do? All those institutions with clout and with a certain shine of an aura about them, they have power and they can help and they can support projects like the one that Artists Archives has carried off with this exhibit. Before I get to questions, which I want to do, I want to ask each of the panelists to give advice. So, framing this in the realm of art or dealing or advocacy, that you pursue, how would you advise someone to support the growth of the local art economy? And I can just pick somebody, or if you have an idea, you could just jump in.
Well, I'll start. I may have the easiest answer. There's a word, aside from assembly, is advocacy. You know, most of my life, I steered clear of government and politics. Who wants to get involved in all of that? But let me tell you, every single one of you have a voice. And as part of the creative world here in this city, your elected officials, your appointed officials, they need to hear from you. They need to know your role in this, your friend's role in this. They need to know your role in making sure that Cleveland is a vibrant community. And we've spent a lot of time in Assembly putting out the action alerts. I know we said we weren't going to talk about some of this, but
Go, man, go.
advocacy, we have a voice. I mentioned Rhonda Brown's position. That position would not exist if this arts community had not advocated for years to make sure we had a #1 person in City Hall, a city that is built on the arts. So the advocacy thing is very important now more than ever. So I'll just share that.
Yeah. Let me give you just a few more seconds to think, which sometimes I find helpful, because I wanted to jump on something that Jeremy is saying, and that I don't think that the region really has framed yet, but I gotta say this in public, and I'm gonna say it in writing. It's an idea that's somewhat new to me. But there I was in Columbus the other day with a statewide arts leadership advocacy group organized by Creative Ohio. And we had the opportunity to talk with some state legislators who were involved in a new committee called Arts, Athletics, and Tourism. And so you can guess how they're looking at that. These are the things that will draw tourists to Ohio to spend money here. And so, of course, the subject comes up, Cleveland Browns Stadium, the idea of this new domed stadium. And who knows how that gets built or if it gets built. But if it happens, whether it's done with all the Haslam's money or some other investors, or whether we all end up ponying up the money for that one way or another, I don't know. But the justification is going to ride very heavily on the arts. And I'll tell you why. It's ostensibly the Brown Stadium, but what they want is a dome. And the reason they want that is to cover it up and use it more, including through the winter. And what are they going to use it for all that time? It's Brown's Stadium. The Guardians have their own place. The Cavs have their own place. Maybe they'll get a Super Bowl at some point. But they're going to have Ariana Grande and Beyonce and stadium-sized concert after stadium-sized concert show up there, making that a reasonable financial venture. The arts are going to make that stadium possible. I'm just saying. Like, I haven't done the research. I haven't added it up. I haven't asked them for their financial pitch yet, which I'm going to do. But I believe that you're going to see that rationale play out, and there can't be any other way that that stadium can make financial sense with all that art, without all that arts activity there. So moving on, what advice can somebody else offer to people to help build the regional arts economy?
I don't have much to say about Ariana Grande or Beyonce, but buying a ticket to one of those concerts obviously would support a big artist, but it would support the city too. So showing up, I think, is the most important part, and that's a way to advocate for the artists. And 2020, COVID, really did a number on attendance for, I think, especially live music, theater productions, and art openings in general. And I think we're still seeing some of that, at least I know I am. Oftentimes there will be, collectors or buyers that will only come out when they know small crowds are at the gallery, which is fine. And that's why I usually host previews and artist talk events so that people can come when it's not Third Friday, which, still has a pretty big crowd even after COVID. But I will say there are age groups now that just don't want to come out. And I understand a lot of that because of health reasons mainly. But I think too, there's just a level of kind of that, maybe I don't need to go. And if you're going to support artists, even if you're not going to invest in their work, being there to support them and tell them that you came and show that appreciation and love, and maybe bring someone new that has never experienced their work before that could turn into a collector or even just a one-time buyer, makes a difference. And I've just noticed there are young age demographics too that just don't leave the house. They would rather be in front of a screen. And that's disappointing. I get contacted all the time by people that are like, I have all this art I want to show. And I say, have you been to the gallery? No. So I'm not going to take the time to look at the art. Sorry. If you're not going to make the time to come out to a show. So I think showing up to anything, to a performance, whether it's theater or live music, or to an art exhibition, makes the world of a difference. I'm showing an artist right now named Clay Parker, who is Cleveland, like old school Cleveland. And he hasn't shown work in probably over 20 years in a large setting. And so many people showed up last night that have been a part of his life for 20, 30 years. So they've experienced him at CIA when he was attending the Institute. They've been with him through his brain cancer struggle and journey. And they're with him now. And some of them haven't talked to him a lot. So to see all those people rally around him, not that every single one of his pieces has a red dot on it now, but the support of those people that came out. I watched a woman unroll a poster that he had painted on probably 15, 20 years ago, and he signed it, and then she wrote him a check. And she's like, I never paid you for this, you gave it to me. And I feel like now it's signed, now it's official, I need to pay you for it. And I just thought that was so beautiful. How does that happen? But she had to come out to the gallery to experience the show and to see him and congratulate him. So showing up physically really does make a difference. And there are a lot of people in this room that come out to my gallery. That means the world to me. It really does. And it means the world to the artists too, to know that there are continued supporters of what they do. So.
Advice?
Jordan, any advice?
Could you repeat the question?
So we're looking for advice for people to help support the local art economy. So whether that's through relationships or however it works, what can people do?
Jeremy and I were talking about this before we started everything. This is something I've talked about for a long time, and it relates to art and entrepreneurship, but specifically the mindset and culture around the profession. And we see this amongst artists, we see this amongst nonprofits that serve artists, that do exhibition programming, and this is not just unique to Cleveland, it's all across the country, probably the world, and it's this mindset of scarcity when it comes to art, right? And it's interesting when we look at language that's used around art, like your question is, how can they support the arts? It's interesting that we don't say, how can they invest in the arts, right? So even looking at like how we talk about things, right? Like supporting the arts as to be an artist is to run a charity. right? It's just interesting, right? So when we talk about like, okay, I like the idea of advice, right? Or like, even if we shift that language of like, okay, how do we invest in the arts, right? Are there any business owners in the audience? Right, excellent, excellent, excellent. I find that there is a huge opportunity for different creative collaborations and partnerships between artists and businesses. And in the professional development workshops that I do with artists, this is something that I'm constantly encouraging, as well as something that I practice for myself, right? Because when we think about the investment of art, we think about like, oh, I like the object, I want to own the object, pay money for the object, and like that's it, right? However, there's so much more that comes from investing in art and cultural asset. There's an opportunity for foot traffic, for event creation, to expand into different audiences and markets because you've now worked with someone who connects and speaks to other people, right? There's opportunities for just content creation, like making videos behind the scenes. We're seeing all of this. And every one of us has a phone. Every one of us has access to artists, to inspiring ideas, to new things that are happening, right? So it's interesting when we talk about like investing in the arts, I don't want to say like, you should do this, or I never like to approach these kind of questions from like an expectation, an obligation, or like a commandment, but more so from a context of inspiring like, this is what we can do together, which is, more fun. It usually provides for more equal power dynamics in the partnerships, right? There's a lot of cool things that businesses and even organizations can do with artists when they view them as not just simply as those making the things or doing the performances. And then also on the artist side, it's really a huge opportunity to come to the table as someone who has big ideas, as someone who is professional, as someone who can communicate these visions clearly, right? Because then the investment becomes very clear. And then, that's more financial resources to create better art, right? So that's more in the context of businesses and organizations. Mm-hmm. When it comes to individuals, how many collectors do we have in the audience today? I'll raise your hand high. You're proud that you're a collector. I think, it's one, knowing that what you're investing your money in, those are cultural assets, right? And how many assets actually appreciate over time, right? So that's something kind of unique there, right? But even, just sharing like what you purchase, with your friends, with your networks, right? Talking about the artists that you believe in, making introductions for that artist is truly tremendous for those that are in this profession. And I can actually share a quick story regarding that. Mm-hmm. So this is like kind of a freebie nugget for artists out there. And it's not even my piece of advice. I do these coaching sessions with an artist in New York. His name is Brainerd Carey. He has a whole platform called Praxis Center for Aesthetics that really supports the profession of being an artist. So we do these like one-on-one consultations where he exchanges kind of like professional coaching, where I exchange kind of consultation in the realm of design. And one of the things he talks about, and this wasn't even uniquely shared to me, he has like videos about this, but as an artist that's trying to get to know collectors and build your network, sign up for a museum membership, but like a high-tiered one. It doesn't have to be like, the highest one, but one that you get invited to the special events that all the funders are at. Because chances are, if they're funding any kind of museum programming, they're interested in art. They probably buy art, right? I was like, this is brilliant.
That's good.
So after hearing this piece of advice, I went to CMA and I purchased a membership.
For all of us or for a specific panelist, you can say so. But do we have any questions? John Sargent.
Yeah, so this Common Currents is an evolution of a show that I did with a bunch of artists that was the Cleveland State Gallery in 2004. A bunch of us got together and with no resources, put together a show, filled it. Happened to be when people were apparently painting the sidewalk up and down Euclid Avenue, so we had 450, 500 people in the gallery during the time. Street people and weirdos and cops, and the idea was sort of to bring artists together to champion something larger than ourselves. Well, after the opening, the energy dissipates, and I was left to man it for 2 weeks, being there from noon to 4 on Wednesday through Saturday. So the partnership and collaboration thing, it takes a building of energy, right? So and then Mary Urbis and I, after many years, we did a show called the Big Ass Art Show. I don't know if you guys remember that. Okay, fun show, regional, where the idea was to champion Cleveland artists, put them in a museum presentation to raise the bar qualitatively for the audience to experience Cleveland artists, not as a jury show going down the aisles of Giant Eagle, but to actually experience them as worthy of very articulate curatorial attention. And do it as a matter of partnership and collaboration in different nonprofit institutions in Cleveland. Raise the bar again. Common Currents now is museum raising the bar regionally, hopefully eventually nationally, which leads to the question, and this is for everybody to think about, because I want to talk to everybody who's interested in this, is what's next?
Mm-hmm.
What is next? The advocacy, the relationships, the communication, the dialogue. Where's the next big idea going to come from? Gary Wolf and I would sit at a diner, and 2 eggs over easy, bacon, and your choice of bread, and too much coffee. But that's where it came out of. It came out of simple navigating of discourse. Hopefully, all of you and communicate with yourselves. However, I don't care. But in order for this Dog and Pony show to really grow, it's going to take all of us putting on our deep creative hats, not bigger, better, harder, faster, but deep, and find out what is next. What is the next iteration of a concept?
When you and I first talked about this show, I envisioned, people from a given nonprofit organization and their board, if it's Artists Archives or whoever, sitting down over, coffee or whatever and saying, okay, let's see if we can do something in Detroit. Who do you know? And then just figure out who you know in Detroit. And then, can we do something with that? Is that worth a call? Or let's think about Pittsburgh. Who do you know? And just write down who you know, who you can reach out to make a relationship, to build it, and to see if you can do something together. Let's take another question. Stormy.
Yes, so I'm hearing a lot of different things. So I heard you mention, Michael, maybe in some areas there's a $400 cap. So that is just an arbitrary number, but let's say there's a cap. I hear the value of relationships and that some of those are very long-term. You meet somebody at the beginning of their career and over time, you've established a relationship that lets you do something bigger and greater. Jordan, you mentioned this idea of collectors. I think there are a lot of people who think that being a collector means you have a lot of money and you're investing in art in a very concentrated way. And as I hear this and this idea of storytelling and the missing generations that are not going out to the galleries, I'm wondering how you view the idea of cultivating younger collectors who are, sometimes it's not always worth it to make small pieces of art that are accessible to everybody. And yet those are the people who, if they had $50 to spend on something unique with a story, that they got to build a relationship with you, and over time as they gain money in their careers, so I'm just throwing a lot of thoughts out there right now, connecting dots between things. I see the symphony and the opera trying to cultivate young patrons by having affinity events. What are the things that are happening to bring young people into the arts as collectors, investors in the engagement of art, the experience of art at galleries? How is that happening, or what might that look like? And maybe that's the better question. What could that look like in Cleveland to begin to cultivate a young collector class? And that could be everybody.
Does anybody want to respond to that? Younger people?
I had an idea.
I mean, my first piece of art was $60. I think I was 25 years old, and now that artist is world renowned. And
So
I couldn't have known that at the time. But
I have this idea, and it popped in my head when Jordan was talking, and then it just kind of made sense how you guys navigated right to the idea and being an artist and having a vision. It popped. I thought about this missing generation because there's so much history here and in other cities as well about the Great Migration. We have so many. We actually went through a whole course of being present in the change of the millennium, being change of a century, being changed with technology. All in our own lifetime, we watched it happen. Who is recording this? We are. But the only way we can actually sell that, you got to sell it like a for 150. And when you said that about how can you raise funds and the advocacy and cultivating relationships, we got to do it through what people are doing right now. They're always on the book. They're always looking at something. How do we, in a way, we have to let them know that art appreciates, not depreciates. And your history in it is valuable. How do we sell it? Like a commercial. Like a commercial. You're doing it with the can. That's like a commercial. We'll send that. It's a physical piece. But we also need to pop in right in the middle of everything and sell it like a 150. Sell it like a BMW. We have to sell our history, because if we don't, we're going to lose this valuable place that we're sitting right now in time. Because we have lived through all of that. But we have to record this. And we also have to invest in the archives of it. So I think this whole panel and what we're doing, this is very important. And we got to push it just like in a commercial. We have to invest in selling it.
Interestingly, they're prominent more in the performing arts, I would say. But the Cleveland Orchestra has the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra. My daughter was a part of that. That's 100 kids rehearsing weekly, presenting concerts at Severance Hall, and that's been going on for a long time. And they work with conducting staff. Like, that's not you have to audition to get in. It's a big deal. But that's developing not just the musicians. Most of those kids are not going to become professional musicians, but it's really developing the audience. Beck Center for the Arts has a children's theater program which is going on 75 years old. Like, this is a long-term pursuit, not just to keep the kids busy, but to get them engaged in a part of culture that's worth engaging. Interesting, and you know, I was about to say that I don't see so much development along that line in the visual arts, but the Cleveland Museum has the Community Art Center over on 25th. CARTA, the collecting organization, has specifically a collection of children's art so that members can pick out things for their kids or grandkids, you know, rooms. I think that, you know, to your point about it doesn't have to be expensive and young people can become collectors. I'll just plug one specific thing right now that anybody would be sharp to collect. The museum right now has in the Prints and Drawings Gallery an exhibit about it's called Karamu Artists Incorporated, which is a printmaking studio at Karamu in the early to mid 20th century. We think of that as a theater, but Karamu had this remarkable print studio that cranked out, I shouldn't say cranked, but artists there made beautiful things. So there's this exhibit at the museum right now, and in conjunction with that, working with Zygote Press, the curators commissioned the creation of a relief print by Antoine Washington. You can buy that print, and that's a landmark exhibit for $40 exactly.
Offered in the 1930s at $40.
And they kept the price the same. That's brilliant. I didn't know that detail. You can get that at Zygote Press, or you can get it at the museum shop. But that's a historic exhibit. For the museum to do an exhibit focused on artists of Cleveland is unusual. Black artists of Cleveland, doubly unusual. You know, in the Prints and Drawings Gallery, not in the Cleveland, you know, gallery. For us all to recognize this history at Karamu, this is a moment. This is a cultural moment. And they've got that print on the shelf for $40. You could have that. A young person could have that, you know. Jordan, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I have a question for everyone. Two questions. Who here feels that art should be affordable? Raise your hand.
That's a tricky question.
I know.
What's affordable?
Here we go. Because that's a number that's different for everyone.
Yeah.
Whatever number is in your head, it doesn't even really matter. Have that number in your head. Do you feel, you know, saying it's across the board, you know, should art just be like
should. Like,
affordable?
are you talking about seriously, let's define our terms. We want real answers here, right? So
Sure.
you're talking about like in reality, like practically, or do you mean like ideally in a perfect world? Of course we all want art to be affordable.
Right.
Affordable and accessible.
Right.
Or is it which term we want to go with? Because they overlap.
You're only on the first question.
I know.
Right.
Well, so this is interesting, right? Like this highlights the value of art and how it's a nuanced thing, right? But let's just kind of entertain just this question, you know, because we could go into specifics. So, who feels that art should be affordable? Just a yes or no,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. So most of us, I think, it sounds like we want art to be affordable, right? Second question. Who wants to see artists thrive financially?
Mm-hmm.
Here's kind of my point, though. We want art, and I get it, right? You know, we want art to be affordable. And we also want artists to thrive financially, right? Not that it's a contradiction, right?
$50 for a piece of art, that's a contradiction. I
Right.
could survive on $50 for a piece of art. Absolutely.
Did you all hear?
Yeah.
So, can you say that again?
I could not survive on $50 for a piece of art.
But what if it's a print that is a one color print and it's an
It's still
addition
too
of
low.
$250?
Oh, that's how.
Imagine How many $50 prints would you have to sell to make a base income, right? So it's interesting whenever we apply business thinking to the arts profession, right? And it's not to say that all art should be inaccessible and out of people's price range. See you kind of, shaking your head back there. Here's the thing, right? Because I teach this to other artists, right? You have to know what game are you playing.
Yeah, there's different markets.
There's different markets. Like, are you playing an exclusive one-of-one limited edition higher price point, right? Because now that's a more valuable asset. There's none of them that are like this thing that you're trying to price and sell, right? Or are you trying to do multiples, right? More affordable, right? Anyone can have it. But then guess what? You have to play the volume game. You have to consider order fulfillment. You have to consider packaging, right? What are your sales processes and systems that are in place to get those things out the door so you can actually make an income as an artist, right? And it's like actually worth your time and energy, right? Or maybe it's a mix of both games. It's not saying you have to do one or the other, right? It's just recognizing, okay, because we can throw around these ideas around like, well, art should be this, art should be that, right? Until it comes time to pay your rent. Until it comes time to, pay for healthcare, right? To actually, thrive as a profession, right?
There are a couple of urgent hand raising going on over there. David.
I'll speak on this. I'm a business owner. I'm also an art collective. I've also traveled all over the world and collected art. So I've talked to artists from all sorts of countries. Art galleries. I think we're part of the shared story worldwide, where you have artists, art galleries. We hear the same conversation. How do we survive the arts? Right? How do we have make an affordable wage? From a business standpoint, two things. I think Cleveland needs an annual Cleveland Art Fair, or needs an annual art show where all the Cleveland artists come together in a central location once a year and actually have an art show. Everyone puts their selling works. And that also provides a central point for people to be able to meet one another. Addition as well. From another business standpoint, I think if you want to be I'm friends who are very successful artists. You have to get out to the country clubs. So another way that the art scene think about this is you got to do what Rolls-Royce does. They sell their cars at yacht shows, right? So I think the art community would benefit if they put a publication together quarterly. All Cleveland artists that want to submit their work go around to all the different country clubs, right? Say, here's the work that's for sale in Cleveland, right? Or try to have art shows, once again, at country clubs, right? Because that's where a lot of the Cleveland wealth is at. Most of my successful art friends here in Cleveland are country club members, right? Where they have friends at different country clubs and they golf. It's not all art is golf, okay? But that's the parlay there is you have to go where the wealth is at. And I think country clubs is at the bridge point, especially with some of the old money in Cleveland. And then I think on affordability, I was just in Spain on vacation, also collecting art. I think what I'd like to see out of more Cleveland artists, even if it's $50 art, right? So you have to have a certificate of authenticity on the back of your art, whether it's one of 50 or one of 25 or one of one, right? Most of the art that I collected out of Spain, when I flipped the painting over, flipped the ceramic over, they provided a simple certificate of authenticity, right? And an explanation of, what that piece of art was or the portion that was in it. So
Were you buying from a gallery or from an artist?
Galleries and from artists who had their own little
And
galleries.
even the galleries produced certificates.
Yeah, they all had certificates, yeah, little certificates. And that was, out of all the countries I've been to, this is the first time, and it seems like it was a phenomenon in Spain, where regardless of what the price was, there was a certificate of authenticity on the piece of art that the artist was producing. And that helps because in the long run, right? You may have a $50 or $60 piece of art that you buy today, right? And what we're hoping is in 50 years from now, that $60 piece of art that you bought is now worth $10,000, right? But you have to be able to prove, right? If you buy something that's not signed, you buy something there's no documentation with it. Let's say the artist does make it 30 years down the road or 40 years down the road, you have to be able to prove the provenance of that, right? You know what I mean? Especially when we get to the world of digital art, someone thinks, well, you could have just digitally printed this, right? So it's like, but how am I going to be able to still prove that this is a one-of-a-kind piece of art 30 years later? So,
Those kinds of things certainly played a role in Jim Corcoran's argument about the May Show. So, of course, if you got work in the May Show, the Cleveland Museum put a May Show sticker on the back. And when that entered the resale market, that mattered to the resellers. So that was. There was another question.
I just want to make sure. When you mentioned, Jeremy, the artists following going to Miami, one of the things we did is we followed the Cleveland Orchestra. Because the Cleveland Orchestra has been going to Miami. And for those I'm from Miami. So for those who go down that way, they realize that you can see the Cleveland Orchestra in Miami because there were people both from other parts of the world as well as Cleveland who wanted to hear the music. And if you know anything about Miami, it was not considered the big cultural space some 40 years ago or 50 years ago. It has developed its own through what David was saying, making sure that there was a connection with people who were developing galleries, purchasing art, and distributing it all over the world and all over the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And, so this notion, that you were saying about, being flexible in terms of following, where there are resources, I think is extremely important. And it builds on John's comment about the notion of where next. And, so I think we need to think about some of those things in terms of where next or what we do now, which I'm agreeing with. And thank you, Jordan, because I do believe that art should be both affordable and artists should be able to live decent lives. But at the same time, I also look at art in a way of being a means of education, both cultural and intellectual, just all kinds of educational levels. And so when I wrote, as a collector, raised my hand, I was thinking about the importance of the affordability of art, because I think everybody should have this opportunity. And there are some STELP programs in Cleveland. Some of us give some of the canned journals to schools where there are volunteers who actually go into schools, and looking for ways in which we can expose children to not just what's going on in Cleveland, but the visuals that might help develop intellectually and spiritually. I mean, all kinds of ways. So I get it. I get what you're saying. You've got to know where the resources are, but at the same time, people do have to be able to live. And I like your suggestion.
And Cleveland to be so conservative, I had to get recognition for my work outside of the city. I received a Jackson Pollock grant. That's an international recognition for my work. Very few people in here even know that. They even know my name. I had to go somewhere else to get recognition for my work. Mm-hmm. But I live here in Cleveland, and I'm always trying. That's the reason I'm in this meeting, because I don't have to be here. I can still be doing the same thing in my own little box, trying to reach out to other places other than the city of Cleveland. Another example of what happened. I have been trying to get recognition for my work here in Cleveland for, 40, 50 years. Finally, I called the writer of the article a racist, out to a degree, but I just said it differently. He realized what I was doing. All of a sudden, I got a little bit of recognition for my work. I don't think that's fair.
The writer who wrote that article about you in Cannes?
Not a Can magazine. Can
Okay.
magazine, I think is great. I really do. but it happened here in Cleveland. That's just an example.
I see.
I'm not gonna point out any names,
Sure.
but that, I'm just, where do, like I said, I only see about 5 black folks.
Yeah. The idea of, I'll just say it sort of from a journalistic perspective, recognizing, presenting an accurate picture of the art scene doesn't happen without the inclusion of the diverse population that is in Cleveland. As you may know, that Cleveland is something like 58% African American population. There's more black people that live in Cleveland than there are white folks or any other race. Yet, when CAN started, with voluntary participation by a bunch of people involved with art organizations, we wanted everybody to get involved because, you know, more people, more energy, more money. I've said in a sort of crass way, I want everybody's money. But we were like 5-6 years into this project, looking through the list of galleries in the back, and there was not one owned or operated by a person of color. That was maybe 2017 or 18. And at that point, there were probably 80 or so different galleries listed in the back of Can Journal. And that was the situation. And it wasn't because we were, you know, turning anybody away. It was sort of a reflection of the generations of inequity that have happened, that have enabled, you know, 25-year-old white folks to take a risk on opening up a gallery and realize they could probably be okay if it doesn't work out. You know, their family will help them out, or they'll figure something else out. You know, there's a lot of factors. Redlining. If you look in neighborhoods where the art sector has provided new energy, Waterloo, Tremont, that happened because the property was cheap. Waterloo is a mostly African American neighborhood, like Collinwood. But who runs those galleries? Not to fault them. Like, they entrepreneurially showed up and took the risk, opened the gallery, right? But who has been able historically to do that? It's people who have had significant advantage in their life. They have families, they have money, they went to college, they're going to give this a shot, and if it doesn't work out, they'll, you know, open a shoe store or whatever they do. But this is a real long-term challenge that personally, you know, I know what I look like, but to look out at the world, I feel like there's been at least in Cleveland, a little bit of progress on that front made in recent years in terms of inclusion and recognition that there are people of all colors making important work and building the culture, you know, and we will all be better and stronger when we do a better job at recognizing people of color in business and making art and really in every way. Gina.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. We have to round things up.
Yeah.
I'm sure. But, and I did miss part of the conversation, forgive me for that, but I wanted to like pull things full front and just say, well, this is obviously a conversation that needs to continue, is it not? We obviously need more people in the room. It's not just black and white. There are all colors that need to be represented. You know, I'm all for diversity, equity, and inclusion. We shouldn't even have to think about it. And I want to charge everybody in the room that if you're in a space that you know somebody else is not there that should be represented, make that change yourself. You have to work one-on-one with that kind of stuff because it's not going to happen in a vacuum, right? So we all have to be personally responsible for that kind of thing. And I'm really intentional to be in the room wherever I can. People say, she was everywhere because she has to be. You know, I went to pick my friend up from emergency, came back here and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? So I'm in the room because I need to be in the room so I can get other people in the room. And that's my job. That's my pleasure, as well as making art, right? So with that said, with the arts economy in Cleveland, and what you were saying, I prefer not to think of me as a Clevelander. I am a child of the universe. Thanks to the internet,
I can send my art everywhere. I can contact people everywhere. There are professional organizations here. There are professional organizations outside of here. There's a lot of things happening here that we need to tap into and connect to that are ongoing that we may not even know about. What's for the fast, right? That's one of the things that we're doing. So there's a lot happening. Artist Archives, like I said, I created the Legacy Workshop primarily for Black folks because we don't have a lawyer on retainer. We don't have access to legacy documents and all these things, but primarily white folks come to that legacy workshop. So I want more Black people in the room, more Asian people in the room, more Latino people in the room, because I want us to have that information so we can take care of our artwork before we die. Right? So we're not leaving our family to run around and try to figure it out.
Let's take one last question. And Jay.
Well, okay, Shori, and many of you know that we're trying to move forward to the next phase of the Foundry Arts Incubator, which is located 1 mile south of here in the middle of one of the most target parts of Cleveland. It's a not-for-profit, 82,000 square foot building, which we're going to redevelop into approximately about 100 studios. First of all, they're going to be, because it's nonprofit, because we're working our butts off to raise the money to do the capital, so it's going to be low-cost space. All modern, everything amenities, but to the point that's being raised here, we are trying to develop programming so that we have set-aside space for minority artists of any, and that's not just the color of their skin, but their economic status. We want to, because we recognize that art offers a path forward for many people to make a living. But, we're talking about how to price, you go to a country club or yacht club or wherever you're hanging out to hide out with people that want to buy your stuff. We want to make it so that the barriers to entry to being an artist are lower. So that it's not as challenging. You don't need to have family money to be an artist, that you can actually produce art at a reasonable cost so that your costs are lower, so you can price your artwork attractively and get it up. Anyhow, I know this is a great subject, and there are just, I think that Cleveland, and I've lived in Chicago and Boston and traveled a lot, and art's been a part of my world since I was little. Cleveland has something incredibly special to offer artists. First of all, in terms of just networking, it's the Midwest, people. We know this. Have you lived in Boston, New York? People are not as nice as Cleveland. It is much easier to network here. People aren't at your throat. They'll open their doors and say, hey, one of our concepts is to have, 93 studios with communal space so the artists can share concepts. Wow, that's really cool what you're doing. We're going to develop it so we have facilities that support ceramics, visual, dance, digital, et cetera, both, musical, we're trying to design this building, and we've interviewed and taken dozens and dozens of artists through it so we're getting the ideas from them, what they need in the building so that they can do their thing productively and make this happen. Cleveland offers an incredibly special environment to let this go forward. David Deming came to me like 13 years ago and said, we've got to reverse the flow of our students going east. We've got to keep them here. And in fact, I think what we're doing now is creating something that will take students from the east and bring them here. Because what does Cleveland offer? A reasonable cost of living. And wow, when they get here, they find they pick up canned journal, they go, oh my God, look at all these art studios, all these art events. I lived in Boston, there was none of that. And by the way, good luck getting into the old money clubs in Boston. That just isn't going to happen. Oh, did you go to Concord High School? Oh, I went to Chicago Latin, which is in the city, and they were saying, Boston Latin. And I said, no, Chicago Latin. And they go, oh, that's interesting. But anyway, so Cleveland, let's embrace what we have. Let's, We do have it. Look at this center, for Pete's sake. This don't exist in New York or Boston. I mean, this collaboration center doesn't exist. Why is it here? Because people recognize the need and go fix it. Let's embrace what we got and go.
Thank you all for coming. Does anybody from Artists Archives want to wrap up the conversation for me?
Well, I can just wrap it up again.
Thank you, Gina. Awesome, ladies and gentlemen. Yes.
And there's more
Here.
coming down the pipe. And again, I charge you all to each one teach one. Bring somebody in the room who's not in the room. And, go see the exhibition. Look at the art that's in this building, right? If you want to have a conversation that's on a deeper level, we have visual arts here. We don't have music. We don't have dance. We don't have theater. Let's have a conversation on a deeper level, right? And bring somebody else into the room. So we can make all that happen. Assembly for the Arts is a conduit for that kind of change, right?
Yeah.
So let's do that. And again, I thank you guys for coming and check out Current. What's the name of it? Current. Check out what's happening at the Sculpture Center. And here's another charge. Everybody here put $5 in the pulpit for all of the organizations that you love. The Sculpture Center lost money. Who else lost money? From the NEM.
From the NEM.
Right. So
Ingenuity.
that's another way to help make sure things are sustainable. Give it up to all of them, not just one, but all the organizations that you love. And then, they pull the artists up and then make sure they're, being equitable across the board. You guys can do that too. You can check out that equity also. I don't have to be the only one.
I think we should also buy memberships to our adult children
Yes.
to the art museum in different places because they're not going to buy it. The
We
young
need
adults.
solutions, not just, problems. We need solutions. So thank you.
Thank you. If you all have time, check out the artwork out in the lobby, the artwork by Assembly's office. You'll see some of the names of artists and here for sale.
All right, thank you.